I came back from a work trip to find out my own parents had sold my house. Not because they were desperate. Not because they needed money. But because my brother wanted a luxury vacation overseas. And they thought I'd just swallow it. My name is Daniel. I'm 29 years old, and I work as a project manager for a construction company. I'm not the richest guy, but I've always been disciplined with money. I bought my first home 2 years ago, something I was incredibly proud of, because no one in my family had ever owned property before. I grew up in a middle-class household with two parents who, at least on the surface, preached the importance of family and sacrifice. I have a younger brother, Ethan, who's 25. While I've always been the quiet, responsible one, Ethan has always been the golden child. He's flashy, reckless, and spoiled. My parents always seemed blind to it, even when he maxed out their credit cards, dropped out of college twice, and treated every job like it was beneath him. Still, I loved my brother. I thought my parents just wanted the best for both of us. But looking back, I realized they never saw me as their son, they saw me as their safety net. So when I saved enough for that little 2-bedroom house, I thought my parents would be proud. Instead, my mom said, "Daniel, maybe you should have waited. You know your brother still hasn't found his footing." And my dad added, "Ethan deserves experiences too. Don't rub this in his face." I brushed it off. I told myself they were just worried about Ethan. But I didn't know then, their worry would soon cost me everything. If you are enjoying this story, please let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe to follow my journey of betrayal and unexpected revenge. It all started a month before the betrayal. My company gave me an opportunity to lead a 3-week project abroad. It wasn't glamorous, I wasn't sipping cocktails by the beach, but it was career-changing. I told my parents about it over dinner, and I still remember my mom's words. 3 weeks? That's such a long time. Who's going to look after your house? I laughed and said, "It's a house, Mom. It'll be fine. I'll lock up." My dad nodded slowly but gave Ethan a strange look. That was the first red flag I ignored. The second came a few days later when Ethan showed up at my place uninvited. He leaned against the doorframe with his usual cocky grin and said, "Man, you don't even know how lucky you are. Owning this place? Meanwhile, I've been dying to go on this luxury cruise with my friends. But, of course, I'm broke." He chuckled, waiting for me to offer him money. I just shook my head. "Ethan, I worked for this. You can do the same. Save up." He scoffed and muttered, "Easy for you to say. You don't even know how to enjoy life." Those words stuck with me. Not because they hurt, but because of the way he said them. Almost like he was planning something. Before I left for my trip, my mom called me. "Daniel, maybe you should leave a spare key with us. Just in case there's an emergency." That was the third red flag. But she sounded so sincere that I gave in. I told myself it was harmless. After all, they were my parents. Little did I know, that spare key was the weapon they needed. When I boarded that plane, I thought I was leaving my house behind safe and sound. Instead, I was leaving it wide open for betrayal. 3 weeks later, I came back exhausted but proud of what I'd accomplished. I rolled my suitcase up to my door, already dreaming of my bed. But when I pushed the key into the lock, it didn't fit. Confused, I tried again, harder this time. Nothing. That's when I heard voices inside. Laughter. Children running. A woman calling out, "Dinner's ready." I froze. My heart pounded. Slowly, I knocked on my own door. A tall man opened it, frowning at me like I was the intruder. "Can I help you, he asked. I stammered, "This is my house." "Who are you?" He laughed bitterly. "Your house? Buddy, I bought this place 2 weeks ago. Got the deed right here." For a moment, I thought maybe this was some twisted prank. But the man standing in my doorway didn't look like he was joking. He held up a folder, flipping through papers until he landed on one with an official stamp. "See? Title deed. Signed and transferred. You're not the owner anymore. Whoever you are, you need to leave before I call the cops." The ground beneath me seemed to disappear. I stared at the document, recognizing my own address printed across the top. My mouth went dry. My brain couldn't process it. I stumbled back to the sidewalk, clutching my suitcase like it was the only thing left of me. The man shut the door in my face. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone. There was only one explanation for this. My parents. They had the spare key. They knew I'd be gone. I drove straight to their house, my pulse racing so hard I thought my chest might burst. When I burst through the front door, my mom was at the kitchen table, sipping tea, as if nothing in the world was wrong. "Daniel, you're back early. How was your trip?" she asked with a smile. I slammed my suitcase down. "Don't play games with me. What did you do to my house?" Her smile faltered. My dad walked in, arms crossed. "Watch your tone, son. We did what needed to be done." "What needed to be done?" I repeated, my voice breaking. "That was my house. The one I worked for, the one I saved for years to buy. And now there are strangers living in it." Ethan sauntered in from the living room, grinning ear to ear. He was wearing a brand new designer watch, the kind I knew cost thousands. "Relax, bro," he said casually. "It was for a good cause. You wouldn't understand." I stared at him. "A good cause? What are you talking about?" My mom reached out, trying to grab my hand. "Sweetheart, listen. Ethan had this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. A luxury cruise with his friends. A chance to network, to finally find his direction in life. But he didn't have the money. So we made a decision." Her words blurred. My ears buzzed. "You sold my house," I whispered. My dad's jaw tightened. "You'll buy another. You're responsible. You're stable." But Ethan? He needed this. He deserved it. And besides, it was just sitting there while you were gone. I looked at Ethan's smug face, his wrist glinting with that watch, his pockets probably stuffed with spending cash from the sale of my home. "How much did you even sell it for?" I demanded. My dad shrugged. "Enough. Don't worry about the details. The important thing is, your brother finally had the experience he deserved." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They hadn't just stolen from me. They had taken my blood, sweat, and tears, the one thing that symbolized my independence, and turned it into a vacation ticket for Ethan. My mom placed her teacup down gently, like this was a reasonable conversation. "Daniel, families sacrifice for each other. We knew you'd understand. You always do." Her words cut deeper than a knife. Because in her mind, my role wasn't son or equal. I was the sacrifice. The backup plan. The safe one to leech from whenever Ethan fell short. I couldn't hold it in anymore. "Understand?" I shouted. "Do you even realize what you've done? That house wasn't just walls and a roof, it was my future. My safety. My years of working late nights, eating ramen, saving every dollar while Ethan blew through money like it was confetti." My voice cracked. "And you gave it away for a cruise?" Ethan rolled his eyes. Oh, come on. Don't be so dramatic. You act like you're homeless or something. You'll bounce back. Meanwhile, I got memories I'll never forget. Jet skis, 5-star dining, parties every night. It was worth it. I lunged at him, but my dad stepped between us. Enough. Ethan deserves happiness too. You've always had everything under control, Daniel. Stop being selfish. Selfish. The word echoed in my head until I almost laughed. Me, selfish? The one who never asked them for a dime, who worked quietly while Ethan drained them dry. Something inside me broke that night. But not in the way they expected. I left their house without another word. My suitcase rattled behind me on the sidewalk, but I barely noticed. My entire body was numb. That night, I sat in a cheap motel room, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of it all. I thought about all the little sacrifices I had made over the years, giving Ethan my old laptop when he needed it more, covering one of his debts once when he promised to pay me back, stepping aside when my parents praised him for doing the bare minimum. It all led here. To them stealing my home and handing it over like it was Monopoly money. I cried. I'll admit it. Not out of weakness, but because the truth finally hit me. My parents didn't love me the way I thought. They loved the role I played. And Ethan? He wasn't my brother anymore. He was just the thief they chose over me. But as the hours ticked by, my tears dried, replaced by something colder. Sharper. If they thought I was just going to roll over, smile, and move on like always, they didn't know me as well as they thought. As I sat in that cramped motel room, the glow of my laptop screen reflecting in my tired eyes, one thought burned through me. They thought I'd just accept this. No. They might have stolen my house, but I still had my mind. And if there's one thing I knew from years of managing projects, it's that the smallest overlooked detail can collapse an entire structure. So I started digging. First, I pulled up the county's online property records. It was all public, if you knew where to look. And there it was, my house, listed under a new owner's name. The transfer had gone through 2 weeks earlier, right when I was overseas. I leaned closer, scanning the document. Something didn't add up. The sale price was listed as barely 2/3 of the house's market value. My stomach twisted. Not only had my parents sold my home without my consent, but they had also undersold it, fast and cheap. Almost like they were desperate for quick cash. And I knew why. Ethan's cruise hadn't been cheap. I pulled out my bank statements, my credit alerts, everything I could gather. That's when I realized the money from the sale had never touched my accounts. Of course, it had gone straight through my parents. They'd somehow forged the paperwork, transferring ownership without me. But here was the problem for them. I had never signed anything. My signature wasn't on those documents. Which meant whoever had approved the sale had committed fraud. Fraud leaves fingerprints. The next day, I walked into the county clerk's office, pretending to be calm. My heart was pounding, but I knew I had to act like just another guy running errands. Hi, I need copies of the sale records for this property, I told the clerk, sliding over the address of my home. She typed it into her computer and printed a stack of papers. As I skimmed them, my throat went dry. There it was, my name, my supposed signature, neatly scrawled at the bottom of the sale contract. Except, it wasn't mine. The handwriting looked close, but it wasn't exact. Whoever forged it must have practiced. I could almost picture my dad sitting at the table, pen in hand, trying to copy the way I curled my letters. I slipped the papers into a folder, my jaw tightening. That was the first piece of ammo. I booked an appointment with a real estate attorney the very next day. His office smelled like old books and fresh coffee, and his sharp eyes scanned the documents I handed him. After a few minutes, he looked up. "This is a clear case of fraud. If you didn't authorize the sale, it's invalid. Forging a deed? That's a felony." My pulse quickened. "So I can get my house back?" He nodded. "Yes. But it'll take time. And once we file, things will get messy. Are you ready for that?" I thought of Ethan's smug grin, of my parents telling me I'd understand. And suddenly, I smiled for the first time since coming home. I've never been more ready. The old me would have confronted my parents immediately, screaming, demanding answers. But this time, I kept my mouth shut. I didn't even let them know I'd moved forward legally. Instead, I acted normal. I answered my mom's calls politely. When my dad asked how I was settling back after my trip, I said, "Oh, just taking it easy." I even congratulated Ethan on his cruise stories when he bragged. Inside, I was boiling. But outside, I was calm. Because I knew something they didn't: their time was running out. While my lawyer began drafting the paperwork to challenge the sale, I started pulling every thread I could find. First, I went to the bank where the house payment had been deposited. With my attorney's help, we requested the records. It didn't take long to see the trail. The money had gone straight into my parents' joint account. Within days, large withdrawals had been made: plane tickets, cruise packages, jewelry. Every cent had been spent on Ethan's once-in-a-lifetime vacation. Second, I dug into Ethan's social media. His posts were a goldmine. There he was, holding champagne bottles on a yacht. Another shot of him with his friends at a casino. A video of him showing off his new watch, captioned, "Thanks, fam. Best gift ever." He thought he was untouchable. But what he didn't realize was that every post, every timestamp, was evidence tying the stolen money to his reckless spending. One evening, I met with a close friend of mine, Marcus, who happened to work in law enforcement. Over beers, I told him the entire story. He didn't say much at first, just listened. But when I showed him the forged signature in the bank trail, he whistled low. "Daniel, this is serious. They could go to jail for this." I nodded. "I know. But I don't want them in jail. Not yet. I want them to understand what they did. To feel it." Marcus leaned back. "So what's your plan?" I smiled faintly. "First, I get my house back. Then, I make sure they never forget who they tried to walk over." A week later, the lawsuit was filed. My parents and Ethan were officially notified that the property transfer was being contested due to fraud. I wasn't there when they got the letter, but I can imagine their faces. Shock. Panic. Maybe even denial. What I do know is that within hours, my mom was blowing up my phone. "Daniel, why would you do this? We're family. You can't take us to court." I didn't answer. My dad left a voicemail, his voice strained. "Son, think about the bigger picture. We did this for Ethan. You'll understand someday." Again, I stayed silent. Ethan texted me directly. "Bro, this is insane. Drop it. You're embarrassing yourself. Everyone knows you'll be fine without that stupid house." That text made me laugh. Because he had no idea what was coming next. Lawsuits take time. Weeks passed. During those weeks, I watched my parents squirm. They tried to act normal around neighbors, but whispers spread quickly in our small community. People noticed when Ethan came home flaunting designer clothes while my parents avoided eye contact. It was the perfect storm. I stayed quiet, working with my lawyer, building my case, gathering more evidence than I even needed. I wasn't rushing. Because revenge, I realized, isn't just about striking back. It's about timing. And when the time was right, I'd smile, just like Ethan had smiled when he flaunted his cruise. But my smile would mean the beginning of the end for them. Weeks dragged by as the legal gears turned, but every day that passed, my confidence grew. My parents called less, Ethan texted less, and the silence between us was heavier than any argument we'd ever had. I knew they were scared. They should have been. Finally, the court date arrived. I wore my best suit, not flashy, just sharp, professional. The kind that said I belonged here. My lawyer walked beside me, calm and collected. As we entered the courtroom, I saw them, my mom wringing her hands, my dad staring at the floor, and Ethan slouched in his chair with that same cocky smirk. The sight almost broke me. Not with sadness, those days were gone. But with the weight of realization, this was my family. And they had chosen greed over me. The hearing began with my lawyer laying out the evidence. He presented the property records, the forged signature, the bank transfers, and even Ethan's social media posts. Every detail painted a clear picture. They had conspired to sell my house behind my back, forged my consent, and funneled the money into Ethan's vacation. The judge turned to my parents. "How do you plead?" My mom's voice shook. "Your Honor, we didn't mean any harm. It was just. Daniel always has everything together, and Ethan needed this chance. We thought," her voice cracked. "We thought he'd understand." The judge's eyes narrowed. "You thought he'd understand you forging his signature on a legal document? That is fraud. A serious crime." My dad tried to interject, but the judge cut him off. Silence. "The evidence is overwhelming. This court rules the sale invalid. The property will be returned to Daniel effective immediately." A surge of relief flooded me. My house, my home, was mine again. But the judge wasn't finished. As for the defendants, they will be subject to financial restitution and possible criminal charges for forgery and fraud. I will forward this case to the district attorney's office for review. The color drained from Ethan's face. My mom gasped. My dad clenched his fists, but even he looked shaken. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in their eyes. After the ruling, I walked past them without a word. But when we reached the courthouse steps, reporters were waiting. Word had spread about the case, about parents betraying their own son. Cameras flashed. Microphones were shoved toward me. "Daniel, how do you feel about your parents stealing your home?" I paused, then looked directly into the cameras. "I feel like I've spent my whole life being the responsible one while others took advantage. But today, I learned something important. No matter who betrays you, family, friend, or stranger, truth always comes out. And when it does, justice follows." I smiled then. Not for the cameras, not for the reporters, but for myself. Because I had revealed the truth, and they couldn't hide anymore. In the weeks that followed, my parents' reputation crumbled. Neighbors whispered, family members cut them off, and even old friends stopped visiting. Nobody wanted to be associated with people who would sell their own son's house for a vacation. Ethan tried to keep up his old swagger, but it didn't last. The cruise was over, the money was gone, and the watch on his wrist was a constant reminder of how hollow his success was. I, meanwhile, moved back into my home. Walking through those doors again was surreal. The furniture was different, the energy felt tainted, but it was mine. Every wall, every window, belonged to me again. And this time, no one would take it from me. Late one evening, as I sat on my porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, I thought about everything that had happened. Was I angry? Of course. Hurt? More than I could ever explain. But I also felt stronger. For once, I had stood up for myself, not just against strangers, but against the very people who were supposed to protect me. I realized then that family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by respect, loyalty, and trust. And sometimes, the people who share your last name can be the first to betray it. But here's the thing, betrayal doesn't define you. How you respond to it does. So, that's my story. My parents sold my house for my brother's luxury vacation. They thought I'd roll over, like always. But instead, I fought back and I won. Now I want to ask you, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have taken them to court, or walked away and cut ties? Because in the end, the hardest question isn't about what they did. It's about what you do after.